Hey, I'm John Landis, host of The Apprenticeship here on YouTube with another quick tip where today we're going to cover routers. Now basically today I'm going to cover two types of routers. You're going to want to get a router in your shop eventually, and when it comes time to shop for one, you need to know what kind you're going to be looking for. Essentially we're going to cover two. One is the fixed router, fixed base router, and the other is the plunge router. Now the fixed router, this happens to be installed into a router table. The router is going to show up to you with the router itself and a base in which it sits. Now I call it fixed because once it's in that base and you've set the depth of the bit that you want, you lock that in and that depth is set for that moment, for that operation. Once it's put into a router table, we offer a little bit more flexibility. We'll cover that in a second. The other router is the plunge router. Almost the same as the fixed in that it is a router on a base, but this has the added luxury of flipping a lever and plunging the router. There's a spring within that, if you let go, lets the router come back up. Is one handier than the other? Not necessarily. They both come in handy for different reasons. Let's take into consideration cutting mortises into dining table legs. Both of these situations can do this operation. Both of them can do it equally as well. One of them does it quicker, one of them does it, just differently. Let's deal with the plunge or the fixed router first into a router table. The router has the 5/16 bit in it. You set the router in there and you lock its depth so that 1/4 of an inch of the bit is sitting above the table. You set the fence, the appropriate distance off of that bit to give us the reveal here. Then you drop the square stock onto the bit, push it the distance of the mortise and lift it off of the bit. You repeat that operation over and over for every mortise that you have. Now when you're finished with the first go around, you have mortises everywhere you need them, but they're only 1/4 of an inch deep where we want them to be 3/4 of an inch deep. So what do? You go back into the router, you undo the base, you raise the router another 1/4 of an inch, you fix the base, and you go through the operation all over again, cutting another 1/4 inch off of that mortise, getting that depth. Once those are done, you have to go back in, raise it again till you have the 3/4 inch depth and doing the operation again. With the plunge router, we would take the square stock, put it into a jig that we made. Now the plunge router does have a fence that attaches to it. We would set that reveal instead of using a fence. We use using this fence. We use a fence based on the jig. We have the depth set according to a stop on the router itself. We plunge the 1/4 inch. We pull the length of the mortise. We let it release. We start again. We plunge. We pull. We let it release, and we do the final pass for a full 3/4 inch mortise. We pull, and that mortise is finished. Then we just simply flip it, move it around, and do it again for all of the mortises. Quicker operation with the plunge router in this particular case. Are there situations where this is a better operation, having a top? Sure, when you're cutting profiles, this might be a better option for you. When you're cutting or rounding over and you're using a bit that has just a bearing on it, better operation for you. If you're going to get your first router, cost-wise, this router is going to be less expensive. A fixed router is less expensive than a plunge router, but in order to get the actual maximum benefit out of a fixed router, you're going to want to get a router table as well. So that's going to bring the cost up to even, if not just a little bit more of this one. Still, if you're a beginner woodworker, I would encourage you to get the fixed router first with a router table. Sure, the operations like the one I just showed you in a mortise are going to be a little bit slower. But what do you care? You're not a mass producer. You're not building 24 chairs at a time like we are. If you have to do that for 4 legs because you're building 2 chairs, that's fine. You can do that operation. You can do any operation on this setup that you can do on this one. It may be slower, whatever, but this will work just fine. Then maybe as you move along, become more of a prolific woodworker and you have bigger, badder projects, you can move on to the plunge router. In short, when you get your first router, get a nice fixed router with a nice router table and you'll be set to go. Hey, thanks for watching. Look for another quick tip later.